Yeah, I'm David Stanners. I'm from the European Environment Agency, Head of International Cooperation, and I'm currently a member of the Asia-Europe Environment Forum, contributing European environmental issues into our Asia-Europe debate. I think very important is to understand in the decisions up to the COP15 is that there's a number of crises which are happening together. So there's the energy crisis, there's a climate crisis, there's a financial crisis, there's maybe a food crisis. And the solutions to climate issues are found in combining those crises together and saying, okay, how can we solve those crises in a way to provide good jobs for people, sound finances, sound environment, and a sound food supply and energy supply. So I think framing the debate in that way is essential for success in the COP15, as well as for implementing beyond that. EU policy, environmental policy, and the ongoing reforms which are happening there are very significant for global interactions with Europe, as well as, in particular, maybe interactions with Asia. I mean, these sort of policies affect trade. They affect, for example, the trade in biofuels, the trade in products and services that we have. And if we get our criteria wrong in the way that we organize the development of, for example, biofuels, getting the criteria wrong with respect to sustainability, then whilst we might be improving ourselves in Europe, we may be offsetting that to some disbenefits in the environment, like cutting down rainforests, but many other benefits as well, moving people off the land, food, things like that. So the policy has serious and potentially important implications. So I think what is really important is that there's a proper dialogue between Asia and Europe so that those policies, those criteria can be defined in a way to provide benefits to Europeans at the same time as benefits elsewhere. But that needs an intensive dialogue to get that right. The dialogue itself is essential because it's a framing activity. Through dialogue you come to a much more common view of things, from which then, that common view, you can then come to much more appropriate decisions. In terms of practical implications, what does that mean? That means that practically we can then, once we have this common view through dialogue, we can then move to agreements on sustainability criteria for biofuels, for example, but also maybe sustainability criteria for other energy sources. Maybe we can organize a lot better specifically trade in certain products so that we have a trade resource flow and a waste flow which is appropriate to our conditions and not just dump waste from Europe into Asian countries because it's too expensive for us to recycle it, for example. So actually tackling those particular issues of practical outcomes, so through dialogue we can have a more common view of them and then come to some common understanding, some sustainability criteria, I think are some very important and practical ways forward. I think one of the important outcomes of the Asia-Europe cooperation development are the networks of people. At the end of the day, these decisions at policy level, but also business level, community level, are made by people. So I think the Asia-Europe cooperation can strengthen such networks, can bring people together so they can dialogue and understand a lot more the issues. So one of the outcomes is, I think, networks, and they're underestimated, how important they are. Another outcome, I think, is awareness raising about the issues. Normally, in Asia, you know about your issues, Europe, you know about ours, but we don't know how they interlink. So communication about where these interlinkages lie, communication about an explanation of that, which then leads to education, to documentaries and information available for members of the public so they understand why we are codependent upon each other. So networks, communication, awareness raising, I think those are really important elements to come out of this cooperation.